At the same time, there's a requirement that we fund the retirement because we're part of the Kansas Public Employee Retirement System. And there's really two systems. Curry could tell you about KPNF. KPNF is Kansas Police and Fire, and it's separate. And within KPERS, there's school teachers, state employees, and city employees. Our contribution to KPNF between 2000 and 2008 went from about 6% to 18%, meaning that we had, by law, and were required to contribute 18% of whatever we paid a police officer in the city of Mission. The state could do that, and that most of the public safety employees are hired and work for cities and counties. So it's fairly easy for the state and the retirement system to shift that and push that burden to the cities to pick up. It has somewhat, it has relieved itself a bit. I think our contribution is now like 14%. The public employee side is somewhere between 6 and 7%, all of which are mandated. Health insurance, which by state law we are required to provide to our retirees, another mandate from the state of Kansas. Anybody that retires, we have to hold them until they reach Medicaid, Medicare age, or eligible for Medicaid, Medicare, depending on whether or not they retired with a disability or they simply retired in terms of their years of service. I will tell you that you can almost pick up any publication and it's going to look the same in terms of what state and local governments are facing. We tend to be the last into recessions in terms of when we see it. It typically hits the small business owners first, and then what happens is over time, what you're remitting back in sales tax declines. And as that declines, what happens is it usually catches up with states and cities. So our decline in revenue really started showing up in 2009. There's something else that's at work, and something that we contemplated as we were looking at the transportation utility fee. And it's sort of hidden. You're not going to see an article written about it. I will direct you to the Johnson County AIM site. Go to the Johnson County AIM site. You can look up values of property throughout Johnson County. Type in Target and go look at what the Target at 6100 Broadmoor pays in taxes today. They actually pay about $90,000 less than they did 2 years ago. Target has the ability to reduce the value of their property. Their land is actually worth more than the improvement that's on it. And Target is actually valued at less than what it was built 8 years ago. There is a shift, especially among corporations, and especially corporation commercial property, that is very subtle, but it's moving towards small business owners in terms of the effect. And the effect is this: as they reduce their value, their equivalent reduction in value was probably equal to the value of property on the north side of Johnson Drive between Maple and Beverly. That's how much they reduced the value of Target, meaning that that had to shift and be paid by someone. How many know what the commercial property rate is? 25%. That means that if you're a resident, your rate that you're assessed for the value of your property is 11.5%, meaning that if you're a resident and there are small businesses around you, their effective rate is twice yours. They have to pay twice in property tax, but you have to pay in your home. Anybody know where the Skill Path property on Squibb is? How much do you think they pay in property tax? Zero. They pay zero. They're owned by an eleemosynary organization, a church, and because they're owned by a church, they don't pay property. The AT&T facility on Fox Ridge, 6 stories, all kinds of satellite dishes. How much do you think AT&T pays in property tax? It would be zero. They are a state-regulated utility, and they're exempt from paying property taxes. There are a number of exemptions that are scattered throughout our community that don't pay taxes, but yet they utilize services. In terms of those large properties that are basically sliding off the roll, that burden gets shifted back to small commercial and to residential. So the idea was, is there a way that we can capture revenue that's fairer than what we're going to see in terms of we just levied a property tax? And if there is, what would they look like? How would you construct them? And how would you make it so that it's fair? One of the questions that we've heard is that the transportation utility fee, as it's assessed now, it's on all property, even if it's vacant. Well, what we've tried to factor into is if you have a vacant property and you're not generating trips, you shouldn't pay it. And so we have an appeals process that basically allows, if you have vacant commercial property and it's not generating trips, you shouldn't have to pay it. The same if you pay property taxes doesn't hold true. I'm sure you all know that. If you own property and it's vacant, you still pay property tax. But as it relates to transportation utility fee, you have to have a way to respect the fee in terms of the trips that are generated. And the other thing that helps is you get redevelopment, and the number of trips increases in the city in terms of the number of trips. The amount that each property owner pays actually goes down because the trip charge goes down, because we're really trying to just shoot for a finite dollar amount. We're not trying to have an ever-growing piece of pie.
10. If I were to put this in comparison, take Kansas City, Missouri. Kansas City, Missouri is 318 square miles. We're 2.5. If this was Kansas City, Missouri, they would be talking about getting grants in the neighborhood of $1.5 billion. So you can kind of get a figure for the scope. So it's the administration of those grant dollars that I'm most concerned about as we move forward. When a property tax bill goes out, it's the city that issued it, and it's the city that assessed it. But we represent 12% of your tax bill.
Be that as it may, my initial thought was that the process here is a little bit flawed. Now, my hat's off to the gentleman over there who's been involved in the process and has known about the problem since March. Shame on me, I didn't know. But I know now, and my proposition is that we need to weigh in on this as business owners. I think the sentiment in the room is clear. Mm-hmm. There may be one person in favor, but overwhelmingly we are not. And so I think we want the same things.
Right.
We want the same things. We're invested here. We want mission to grow. We want the best for mission. We need to approach it in a spirit of cooperation. Fundamentally, people are just not up on what they're not in on. I don't
Correct.
feel like I'm in on this. And I'd like to get in on it. So the fundamental question, again, is what's our recourse? Yeah. Now that we look at this thing and we're throwing up all over it, what do we do about it so that we can move forward in a spirit of cooperation? That's really what we need. We want the same thing. It's about how do we achieve that? So
right.
I suggest we revisit the matter. Question is how. I'd like you to answer that, please.
City administrators basically, city council makes a decision, city administrator implements that decision. So once the city council made the decision, I basically finished my budget working papers and submitted them to the county. One of the other problems that we have in Kansas is that we actually have to submit our budget to the county and to the state by August 25th, even though our fiscal year doesn't start until January 1st, meaning that we have to make revenue estimates typically 6 months before our first dollar comes and 18 months before the last dollar comes, meaning that you have this huge variation that can occur, especially in a down economy. So as I look at what the options are for the city council, we have a transportation utility fee, which we've levied and which we've submitted to the county because it's August 31st. So the county already has it. It's already been certified to the county. As it relates to the amount that we're collecting, I just thinking off the top of my head, and I hate to do this because I have 80 witnesses. Probably one of the things that you can look at this point, is there a way that through the current TUF ordinance as it is written, that we have the capability to rebate whatever it is that we collect. We do a rebate program as it relates to people based on their income, and we do that for a portion of our property tax, and we do it for our solid waste, so that there's a rebate and franchise fees. So if your income falls below a certain level, you come and you apply to the city, and you actually get a portion of your property tax rebated to you. There's a way that we could come up with something similar. I think One of the things that you have to, and it's the thing that we struggled with when we were reducing the mill. In part, we reduced the mill as we put the transportation utility fee, trying to lessen the burden that we were going to have on small business owners, understanding that that commercial property is at a different assessment rate than residential. If we were to do it over, then we wouldn't have reduced our mill. And maybe the TUF would have been less, but then the question is, would our burden have been smaller or greater on small businesses? And I think the answer is it would have been greater. And I think if we all maybe sit down and looked at what all the options were, there's some things that transportation utility fees are really good for. There's a transparency, meaning that the money can only be used for streets and sidewalks and trails. If it's a property tax, it just goes into the general fund and then it has to be transferred out. And in a year or 2 years, if you have a different city council, they can decide whatever they want to in terms of how to use that mill. In a transportation utility, you can't do that. It's dedicated. It can only be used for streets. And so my fear would be, if you start shifting back towards property tax, I think most of the people in this room disproportionately will be affected worse. And I look at what I think other taxing jurisdictions are going to have to do to survive, and I see mill increases in the future just simply because they don't have, the school district doesn't have another source of revenue besides the state of Kansas, and when the state of Kansas is broke, I don't know where they go to get the money other than property tax. There isn't another source for them. And so I look at it. What? The same one that we do under our stormwater utility. We can actually, levy a special tax lien in order to collect it.
But if it's not a tax, how do you levy a tax lien?
It's a utility lien. It would be like if you owe a water bill.
We have no recourse.
How close is this city to going bankrupt?
The city going to bankrupt?
Right, you make it sound like they have no money, no revenue source, that everything you get goes to the state. I know I write, and I'm one of the smaller businesses in here that writes a check to the state every month for sales tax collection.
Correct.
And you're talking like all this money, there's not enough to repair some streets, rebuild some streets. After what you did to Johnson Drive, you apparently got some money. How close is this city to filing bankruptcy? They have cash in the bank?
Yes. Our fund balances have increased every year. 2007, we made our largest transfer from our general fund to our capital improvements of $1.6 million.
How much of the Johnson Drive corridor does the city own?
Of the Johnson Drive corridor,
What they have bought up through stormwater?
we own roughly from west of Maple to halfway between Reeds and Outlook.
Okay, when will that property be marketed and sold?
That property, as it exists in terms of its depth, and we worked with Red Development to try to come up with a plan. You can't get enough depth because of where the stormwater boxes are and where the creek is in order to entice somebody to build there, given the needs that you would have for parking in the area. So it's a function of parking. Bob Hartman, if Dave Miller was here, we've looked at a plan as relates, is he? As it relates to the development of that corridor. I think and Bob or Dave can correct me, I think we now have one that works in terms of what people like, that they see in terms of Johnson Drive. It's 4 lanes. It has a park and a city market amenity where the old Harleywood's building is. As it relates to the Downtown Visioning Committee, we're actually going to have public forums and invite people to say, what parts of this plan do you like? What parts do you not like? What we tried to do is...
I was at every meeting when you went through this form-based code. We
Correct.
argued against all of it. Nothing mattered. It was passed. Period.
How is that committee chosen, Mike? Can you explain that process?
Which one?
The Visioning Committee, and if someone wanted to be on the committee, would they be able to be on that committee?
The Downtown Visioning Committee is appointed by the mayor. The committee members that we have now are half business owners and half citizens or residents.